This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. With the baseball playoffs in full swing, fans and viewers will hear God Bless America during every seventh-inning stretch. A music scholar tells us how it has become such a powerful national song. With a new head of the Fed and the fear of national default in the air, progressive economist James K. Galbraith reviews the meaning of government shutdowns, budget sequesters, and the debt ceiling. And Bill Press talks with Iowa Congressman Bruce Braley. Are you tired of Tea Party Republicans and Rush Limbaugh dominating the airwaves? Do you want the facts you won't get on Fox or even on CNN? Then stay tuned. Our sponsor, 21st Century Democrats, works hard to get everyday Democrats involved in returning our party to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Sit back and listen, then stand up and fight. And follow 21st Century Democrats on Facebook for all the latest progressive news. We're glad you can join us. Everyone knows the song God Bless America. It will be sung during every postseason baseball game. But it has a powerful and controversial history, and, says author Sheryl Kaskowitz, communal singing of it can have a coercive element. And joining us now on americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats, Sheryl Kaskowitz is a scholar of American music who most recently served as a lecturer in American Studies at Brandeis University. She earned her Ph.D. in music from Harvard University and a B.A. from Oberlin College, where she also trained as a singer. Her book, God Bless America, The Surprising History of an Iconic Song, traces the history and uses of the patriotic song, its origin, and the politics behind it. Sheryl Kaskowitz, thanks so much for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
Thanks so much.
God Bless America is not our national anthem. How did it get appropriated by the public and the government to serve as one?
Well, since the song's premiere in 1938, there was almost an immediate call to make it the national anthem. It was something of a spontaneous response that people tended to rise and remove their hats even when they weren't asked to do so. And Irving Berlin, who wrote the song, and Kate Smith, who made it popular right around its premiere in 1938, they both said publicly that they didn't intend for the song to replace the national anthem. And some of the criticism around the song accused them of trying to do that. And it's interesting to think about, even though the Star-Spangled Banner has roots in the 19th century, it was only officially made the national anthem in 1931. So when God Bless America premiered, it was a relatively new phenomenon to have an official national anthem and to have it be the Star-Spangled Banner. But I think that because the song is easy to sing, people tend to know it, I think that it does fall into that, it can be easily used as that, either when it's being embraced as that by people who are doing the singing, or when it's being imposed, or people are asked to sing it in that way.
Your research tells us that God Bless America really is a Tin Pan Alley pop ballad written for a World War I musical review. From a purely musical standpoint, how did it get to be invested with so much pomp?
Right. So Irving Berlin wrote it as a simple melody, a lead sheet with pretty simple accompaniment, and it was really Kate Smith's treatment of it in the months after its premiere that moved it in this direction. Kate Smith's arranger was named Tony Gale, and it was he who added a harp intro, brass fanfares, a chorale style treatment that sounded like a hymn. They really, if you listen to those early performances, they really threw everything that they could at the song, and I think that a lot of those things are what solidified its association as an anthem. She slowed it down from the way that Irving Berlin had originally envisioned it, almost as a march, and Kate Smith did have a huge influence on our perception of the song. Her her recordings are what's heard a lot of times at baseball games and other places. And early on, she sang it every week on the radio, in addition to putting out a recording. And so I think that in terms of our perception of the song as an anthem, that's one place where she and her team really did have a big influence.
We're speaking with Sheryl Kaskowitz, author of God Bless America, The Surprising History of an Iconic Song. Is this a Republican song now, in the way that the Battle Hymn of the Republic or This Land Is Your Land are Democratic songs?
Well, I think it's interesting to think about. I would say it might not be that clear-cut. First of all, even though we think about This Land Is Your Land as a Woody Guthrie folk hymn, This Land Is Your Land was actually the campaign song for George H.W. Bush. And so I think that though over time, these associations have become stronger. Early on in 1940, God Bless America was the campaign song for FDR and also for his Republican challenger, Wendell Willkie. And so it was used in a wide range of contexts. It hasn't always been a conservative song. I found references to it being sung by labor unions and the civil rights movement in the 1950s and early 1960s. And it was really the Vietnam War and the rise of the Christian right in the 1970s when the song became more strongly associated with conservatives. And then, and both Nixon and Ronald Reagan used the song. Ronald Reagan is credited as being the one who brought the phrase into political, to make using that phrase a political imperative. So again.
So you're saying our music crosses the aisle? Our music brings together two warring parties? Is that possible?
Well, I think that, again, it's the power of these kinds of songs to carry these different meanings depending on how they're used. So right after 9/11, for example, I think for a lot of people, any associations with the song, with the song's political meaning, were suspended. But I do think that it was the Vietnam War where it kind of crystallized or strengthened its connection to upholding the status quo. But I don't think that either one is exclusive. Either song can be used and then appropriated and then reappropriated, and I think that's part of what makes songs such powerful symbols and tools, really, in American culture.
Is the popularity of God Bless America due to the fact that it's, say, easier to sing than the Star Spangled Banner as far as the range of notes and that kind of thing? And what's the power of communal singing?
Well, certainly the fact that it's easy to sing is an important aspect of why it's popular, because I think that people often want a song. They want to be able to sing together, and the melody to God Bless America is very simple compared with the Star Spangled Banner. It has a smaller range, and the modern language also is easier to navigate, and it sort of has a more direct connection to modern life. And in terms of communal singing, in my book, I'm using God Bless America as a case study to look at the role of communal singing. And so on one hand, it can really, it functions as a secular ritual that can serve to strengthen community ties. And in anthropology, there's this term called communitas that talks about bonds created during rituals that cut across social divisions. I really do think that singing together in a secular singing in a public space definitely does create that sense of community. But on the flip side, because I don't want to get too kumbaya about the whole thing, I think it also has a very powerful coercive element to stand up and have a song sung and having people surrounding you singing words that you might not believe, and it's been used in that way, at other points in history, so I see this communal singing as a very powerful force, both in terms of strengthening community ties and also contesting them through protest, and as well as this sense of a coercive tool.
Mm-hmm. God Bless America, you hear in a lot of, and you mentioned baseball games earlier, and a lot of the major league parks use it as their seventh inning stretch song. But there's a little irony there, right? Because so many of the players who are made to stand at attention are not American. Nearly 30% of baseball players are not American. I mean, does that seem odd, or?
Well, certainly there's a lot of irony there. And, as I said, God Bless America was added to the seventh inning stretch after 9/11 as part of a way to commemorate the attacks. And the fact that it's stayed there we're going on, for 12 years now, I think makes it a really interesting moment in a lot of ways. I think that we need to understand that ritual as really focus on the fans, much more so than the individual identities of the players, though, of course, it highlights one of the criticisms of the song in that, why are we only asking God to bless America? And it kind of, to have this very international group of players standing and singing this song highlights that aspect. But I find it to be a really fascinating moment because it has persisted after 9/11, and again, the meaning of the song has shifted, early on to be in support of troops rather than commemorating 9/11, and we'll just see what happens as time goes on and the historical context shifts again. But the song seems to, I think it's going to remain in place. It's hard to imagine them deciding to stop. But because of its ability to shift in terms of its meanings and associations, who knows what associations will be there in the seventh inning stretch, if it will still be 9/11, if it will be troops, or whatever it is that's next.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see. I mean, as we've seen it change so much from 1918 when it was written to when it was first performed by Kate Smith some 20 years later to where it is now. Interesting stuff. Sheryl Kaskowitz, scholar of American music, the author of God Bless America, The Surprising History of an Iconic Song. Sheryl, thank you so much for your time with us today on americasdemocrats.org. Look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, and this is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Do you want to get involved and help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box? You can make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future and help us keep this show going and to elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Economist James K. Galbraith says Democrats may have outsmarted themselves on the budget sequester. We'll hear from him in just a moment. Right now, we turn to Jim Hightower, America's #1 populist, for his common sense commentary.
As Lily Tomlin has noted, no matter how cynical you get, it's almost impossible to keep up. For example, imagine if a prestigious group announced that this year's World Environmental Prize will be awarded to BP for its unique contribution to the ecology of the Gulf of Mexico. Too absurd, you say? Right. But try this one. An Iowa group announces that the World Food Prize will go to Monsanto for pushing its patented, pricey, genetically tampered frankenseeds on impoverished lands as an answer to global hunger. This would be so morally perverse that the sin in cynical would be spelled S-I-N. Yet, it's actually happening. Rather than encouraging sustainable farming and self-sufficiency in impoverished communities as a way to alleviate poverty and malnutrition, the World Food Prize has been won by a profiteering biotech seed and chemical monopolist that's the freakish opposite of sustainability. Monsanto is globally infamous for bullying family farmers, bribing and corrupting governments, stiffing independent scientific inquiries into its hokum, running false ads and fraudulent PR campaigns, and going all out to keep consumers from knowing that the crops produced by its seeds contain alien, bioengineered DNA and have not been tested for long-term health and environmental problems. Why would this avaricious outfit get any sort of award? Much less one that can give it a false legitimacy as a corporate savior for the world's poor. Perhaps because Monsanto is a major funder of the World Food Prize. Indeed, the foundation that hands out the award is headquartered in downtown Des Moines in a historic building that recently got a spiffy remodeling thanks to a $5 million donation from, you guessed it, Monsanto. This is Jim Hightower saying, how cynical is that? Even Lily Tomlin wouldn't have imagined it.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. Economist James K. Galbraith offers his view on the way out of America's politically driven economic mess, with an emphasis on the environment, infrastructure repair, and an aging population. And we're joined now on americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats, by James K. Galbraith, who holds the Lloyd M. Benson Jr. Chair of Government Business Relations at the Lyndon B. Johnson School of Public Affairs, University of Texas at Austin. He is a senior scholar with the Levy Economics Institute and chair of the board of Economist for Peace and Security, an international association of professional economists. James Galbraith, thanks for joining us today on americasdemocrats.org.
My pleasure.
And always nice to speak with you. With interest rates low, the financial sector seemingly in good shape, why is the economy growing so slowly?
Well, the financial sector may be in good shape for its own purposes, but it's not doing the job that we expect it to do for the economy. That's basically the problem. The banks are not underwriting commercial and industrial loans. They're not financing business expansion. They may argue, and maybe correctly, that they don't see the prospects out there that so there's this kind of feedback loop involved. But basically, the private financial sector is not supporting economic activity in the way that it did in repeated waves over the last 30 years.
Is it fear? Are they afraid to be lending the money because of what we've just been coming through with this huge recession?
I think it's partly fear. It's partly that the banks have other ways of making revenue, which are very safe. They can borrow from the central bank at zero, lend back to the government at 2 or 3%, and pocket the proceeds at no risk. They can speculate in various short-term activities, which are not particularly job-creating. And they are, like everyone else, are looking at the larger uncertainties of the situation. So it's partly what economists would call a coordination problem, and partly an institutional failure partly a regulatory failure. And all of these things are basically have us stuck where we are.
Do we have enough stimulus in the economy right now? And if so, aren't we then looking at higher mortgage and student loan interest rates?
I think that what the word stimulus is not a helpful word here, because it keeps suggesting if we just add a little more spending power, we will get back to full employment prosperity. And I think that's it's a bit illusory. What we need is to think through what needs to be done in our economy, and then to put the resources into that for the long term. And I think there are a lot of competing claims that could be made, but clearly there's a major environmental question, a major infrastructure issue. There's a large question of providing properly for an aging population. If we put the resources and created the institutions that would deal with issues that we clearly confront, then the functioning of the economy would follow along. If we just ask, spread spending power through the economy, you can get a bump in the statistics, but I don't think you're going to get a long-term revival of the kind of economic growth that we've seen historically. It's not in the cards under current conditions.
It seems that all the positive news that we've seen economically have just been those little bump-ups of statistics that don't necessarily help the larger populace. And we obviously can't keep going on that way.
Well, I think we can and probably will keep going on that way. It's not a very happy situation. And I think that given that we do face a lot of what some people call headwinds, we ought to be thinking about the role that some of the institutions that we have should be playing. It makes it more important to have a robust social insurance program. It makes it more important that the Affordable Care Act, that Obamacare, be made to work for the whole population. It makes it more important that we strengthen rather than undermine the public schools. More important that we have decent basic retirement under Social Security for the whole population. So it makes it more important that we resist the schemes to privatize, dismantle, that we resist the scare talk about the unsustainability of these programs. They turn out to be a vital part of what can make what I think is inevitably going to be a difficult period more tolerable for the broad population.
All right, let's talk sequester. Is the ongoing budget sequester undermining everything President Obama and the Fed have been doing?
The budget sequester is a purely destructive policy for sure, except insofar as it may be having some effect on the military budget, and if it brought some reevaluation of the strategic function of the armed services, that would be a useful thing. But in every other area, the sequester is simply a slash and burn tactic aimed at regulatory functions and the other services and that the government provides, and it's being used in, as you might expect, in bureaucratic infighting to selectively target particular offices which may have been inconvenient or developed enemies, and this is all very arbitrary and capricious and fundamentally dangerous. It's impoverishing us all to some degree.
Well, let me throw you a two-parter here. So did President Obama drop the ball on the sequester issue? And then the other side of that is, how dangerous is it to the economy for Republicans to keep talking about shutting down the government?
Well, I think that we will learn, as the Republicans might have learned back in when it was in 1998, that shutting down the government is not a popular move. It plays to the narrow base of the Republican majority in the House of Representatives, so to say, to the far right in those districts, but it doesn't play at all to the population at large. And what you want to have to ask is about the Republican Party. Does it really care? We have a party which is, at the moment, rooted in its control of the House of Representatives, and the strategy which consolidates that control and again appeals to the base of the majority of House Republicans is not, absolutely opposite to a strategy that would carry an appeal to the population as a whole. And we see that on issue after issue. We're going to take immigration as another example. Did the president drop the ball? The sequester did have some origins in the White House, and it was considered by them to be an ultra-clever strategy that would force a grand compromise, so-called, which is a way of saying that they thought the heat would be so great on the expenditure, on discretionary expenditures, that the Congress would buckle and conduct a major cutback in Social Security and Medicare, and of course that mercifully hasn't happened yet. So I think the let's say the Hamilton Project veterans in the White House outsmarted themselves on this one, and I think they clearly realized that.
We're speaking with James Galbraith, Lloyd Benson Chair of Government Business Relations at the Johnson School of Public Affairs, University of Texas at Austin. What role does the education establishment play in the current economy? We seem not to be producing enough of the right kind of workers at the same time that rising tuition is producing crushing debt.
Well, there's clearly a problem of student loans, and there's a problem of the fact that student loans cannot be relieved in bankruptcy anymore, which creates for some people severe difficulties that are going to haunt them through their adult lives unless that particular law is changed. It's a preposterous position, and we should not have a situation in which, for the benefit of the lending companies, that you have essentially unpayable debts following people their entire lives. That's a big difficulty. Is the economy as a whole not got the right mix of workers? I don't really regard. I'm a professional educator, university professor, and I recoil from the idea that the function of the university is to prepare workers for the economy. The function of the university is, first of all, the pursuit of knowledge, and secondly, to help prepare a citizenry for broader participation or full participation in the life of the society and in democratic processes. And are we falling down on that? Well, yes, but that's a different story altogether.
Okay. Now, conservative politicians, including those who should know a few things, keep saying the U.S. economy under President Obama is going to make us look like Greece. Is there anything there at all?
I've been to Greece many times during the crisis, and there's a huge difference between the United States and Greece. Greece is a country that never had strong public institutions. They are being strained to the breaking point. It's heartbreaking, actually, to walk through any major Greek city, Thessaloniki, Athens, to see people sleeping on the sidewalk, old people going through the garbage, the empty storefronts, the pawn shops. I mean, it is a very sad scene. I'm not saying that we don't have parts of the United States that have been blighted for a long time, but overall, the U.S. is much more stable than Greece is at the moment. And from the standpoint of its position in the world financial system, there's no comparison. And it's obvious that you have Greek bonds that will scarcely be sold at very high interest rates, and U.S. government bonds that anybody will buy at 1 or 2%, and basically zero for short-term funding. So financially, the two governments are diametrically opposed positions. Socially, the conditions in the U.S. on the whole are just much more stable than they are in Greece.
Okay, we're going to leave it on a positive note.
Comparatively speaking.
We want to take advantage of that anytime we can, of course. James Galbraith joining us today on americasdemocrats.org. As always, a pleasure. Thank you very much, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Help get our party back to its roots and to success at the ballot box. Make your contribution to Democrats for America's Future to keep this show on the air and help elect stand-up Democrats. Go to americasdemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. This is americasdemocrats.org, the weekly netcast for stand-up Democrats. And now, Bill Press and his guest, Congressman Bruce Braley of Iowa.
Lynn Sweet is here as a friend of Bill this entire hour from the Chicago Sun-Times, and we are now joined by the good congressman from Iowa, Congressman Bruce Braley. Hey, Congressman, it's nice to see you.
It's good to be back on the show, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a while. I have to ask you right up front, the story this morning is, the WIC program is shut down across the board. 800,000 federal employees are furloughed, but the House gym is still open. Not for the staff. The staff gym is closed, but the members' gym is still open. Why?
Well, probably because it's one of the few places where Republicans and Democrats actually talk to each other, Bill. Well, it's ironic because I've been telling people that was the best place for me to develop relationships with my colleagues. Down there, you can find out what people did before they came to Congress. You can find out about their families. You can talk to them about areas of common interest. So I find it ironic that there's this big push to shut down the House gym when it's one of the rare places people come together and actually talk about how we can build relationships, which is the only way we're going to get out of this mess.
But that's an important point. But it used to be when Congress was in session more and people were here more than 2 days a week, right? That those conversations important took place over lunch or over dinner. There were other opportunities. Now it's left to the gym.
Absolutely. Now it's the mad dash to get back to your district, and we have very few opportunities to actually get to know each other on a personal level. I'm proud of the fact I have a lot of Republican friends on the other side, and I don't agree with them on everything, but I have personal relationships with them. And I was able to get 3 bills passed into law serving in the minority in the last Congress. And the only way you do that is by building relationships with people and having an ability to talk to them even when you disagree. That's the way people in the real world deal with problem solving.
Oh, amen. And it used to be that way. Lynn.
It is. It's actually, Paul Ryan works out in the gym, and it was there that Congressman Luis Gutierrez found him after the election in 2012, and Luis Gutierrez says they forged their unity in moving immigration legislation. But let me ask you this. There's now a bill out there by Congressman Patrick Murphy of Florida and Bill Foster of Illinois to remove the essential status for the employees of the House gym so that you just don't have the personnel there. Oh. What do you think of that?
They must not have been down to the gym lately. There's hardly anybody working down there. There's no towel service.
No towels.
No, and so we're doing our own laundry down there. And we pay a fee to belong to the House gym. So this is no different than if you're working at an employer that offers a wellness program, you pay a fee to belong. That's what we do there.
What's the monthly at the House gym?
I don't know that the monthly is. We pay an annual fee every spring. I think it's about $260
a year.
A year.
All right. From the House gym to the bigger picture, we are day 9 of the shutdown. Do you see any end in sight?
No.
No?
Well, I assume that eventually we're going to have to deal with the debt ceiling that a lot of the people in the House apparently don't think is a real issue or will have no meaningful consequences, despite the fact that the last time we came up to the edge of this debt ceiling, we saw devastating consequences just in anticipation of default. So it's going to have to be dealt with. But right now, it's like being in Groundhog's Day on the House floor. We keep doing the same thing every day with no meaningful consequences to get these issues resolved. And it's going to take real leadership from somebody in the Republican Party to move beyond where we are now. I was there when we voted on the Speaker of the House earlier this year. I don't recall Ted Cruz getting any votes to be Speaker of the House. And yet he is effectively running the House agenda.
But do you see cracks for all your Republican friends then? Are they privately telling you that they have to move a position? I mean, there are people speaking out a little more now who Senator Graham, Senator McCain, some others are saying, well, this was a bad strategy to think that we could leverage an attempt to kill Obamacare into getting something. So if your brothers and sisters on the Republican side, are they telling you that what are they telling you that they're telling their leadership to move the situation to some end here?
Well, I have talked to a number of my Republican colleagues who have publicly stated it's time to move on and bring a clean budget bill to the floor.
No, but see, that's not the way to do it. What is the plan? You can't see you have to sequence it with something else.
But I want to ask
I don't understand what you're saying. That's what can bring this bill, this part of the problem, to the floor. And the Speaker said yesterday that there aren't the votes to pass it. I think he's blatantly wrong on that. If you bring this bill to the floor, you will get 218 votes for it. He's just afraid of having that happen.
Afraid of success.
So I was going to ask you, because President Obama yesterday said, again, let's have a vote today. We can just get this thing over with.
That's right.
And if there were such a vote, you're convinced?
I'm convinced there would be the votes to pass it.
And he won't do it because?
Because he is afraid of the consequences of success.
And the consequences of success, consequences. So the government would reopen, but for him, he's afraid of losing his job. I mean, does it really boil down to that?
I think there's that, and I think there's also an incredible amount of pressure that he is hearing from his members who go home and have their beliefs reinforced by the people they're talking to that there is a path forward to repeal Obamacare.
Right.
They believe that in the core of their being.
I want to share with you my concern right now because I think this shutdown is a disaster. The sequester is a disaster. The default would be the worst of all, right? So, and I think President Obama is absolutely right on all this issue. But my fear is, we were told the sky was going to fall with the sequester, and then they carved out TSA and they carved out air traffic controllers, and we're like 8 months into the sequester. A lot of people are hurting, but still, countries moved on. We were told the sky was going to fall with the government shutdown. We're 9 days into it right now. For most Americans, life goes on. And now there are people saying, default's not going to be that bad. Here's the front page of the New York Times today. Senator Richard Burr from North Carolina is saying, well, we may not be able to pay all of our bills, but it won't be so bad. We'll pay some of our bills. And, I mean, why aren't the American people more upset about what's going on? And do you think that not paying our bills, defaulting, not raising a debt ceiling, will bring the economic catastrophe that people predict?
Yes, because I was here in 2008 and the end of 2008 when we dealt with the last economic calamity. And we saw what happened when Congress failed to take action. The markets responded in a single day, and the tumbler started to fall. So people who want to believe that if we default on our debt, nothing bad is going to happen, I challenge them to explain to the American people what they're going to do to restore confidence in the economy once it starts to crumble. People are already starting to contact my office. The sad reality is unless the sequester impacts you, unless the shutdown impacts you, you don't feel the effects of what's happening. But when I talk to young women who are in Head Start programs that are shutting down because of the sequester, and we're the ones that are always telling them, you've got to get a job, you've got to get an education so you can take care of your own family. And this is one of the few programs that allows them the opportunity to do that, and you want to pull that out from under them, then you start to hear from people whose lives are being dramatically impacted.
And one of the lunacies of the situation, isn't it? It's likely now that all federal workers in the end will get pay even if they have not worked during this period. Won't Congress agree to that?
Well, the House took that vote.
Right.
The Senate hasn't taken it up yet, but that's the reality. Yeah.
Right, so the reality is services are being denied to people who need them. Workers aren't working who, in the end, however this is resolved, and someday it will be, are going to get paid anyway. Though, can I just say, I live in a block with my good neighbors are federal workers, and it's still a very nerve-wracking time. In this town, when you say you may not be affected, you know, in Chicago there are thousands of federal workers and people who work at Great Lakes. This is a real nervous time because, you know, it's easy for me to say, oh, they'll probably get paid, but you want to know it if it's your paycheck in question.
And if it's up to Congress to make that happen right now, you know.
Yeah.
But I was talking to a union organizer in the Quad Cities on Monday of this week. They had a certification election that night. And those employees and that employer are in a state of limbo because there were not people there to certify the election results because of the shutdown. And there are ripple effects throughout the country that people are just now starting to feel.
Congressman Bruce Braley with us from Iowa. What district in Iowa?
First District.
The first district in Iowa. We are in day 9 of the shutdown with the crisis of the debt ceiling looming just a week away and no end in sight. Your questions, your comments, you rarely get a chance to ask a member of Congress a question. You can do so right here at 866-55-PRESS. We'll be back on the Bill Press Show. Stay with us.
Like politics? Then like The Bill Press Show on Facebook. This is The Bill Press Show.
12 minutes before the top of the hour, we're going to talk about the McCutcheon case. As President Obama said yesterday at his news conference, this is the case heard by the Supreme Court yesterday. If they approve this, it'll be worse than Citizens United. Elizabeth Wydra from the Constitutional Accountability Center will be here in studio with us in the next hour. Right now, honored to have with us Congressman Bruce Braley from the 1st District of Iowa in studio with Lynn Sweet, irrepressible Lynn Sweet, the Washington Bureau Chief of the Chicago Sun-Times. So, Congressman, Lynn and I were talking in the last half hour about some of the issues, very important issues, that have just been totally eclipsed by this shutdown, many of which Congress ought to be dealing with. Immigration reform came to the fore yesterday with this protest on the Mall. The Farm Bill is another case of something that's just been kind of forgotten. Right?
Never used to be a partisan issue. It used to be a regional fight for the most part. And for the first time last year, the Republicans in the House refused to bring a farm bill to the floor. Mm-hmm. And so they kicked it down the road for a year. It expired on September 30th. Now all of these programs, including ones that were going to save us money, the Senate Farm Bill is projected to save $23 billion, hasn't been voted on. It was torn apart in the House, and it was presented as a fake farm bill that 532 organizations opposed because they pulled the nutrition funding out of the Farm Bill, voted on that separately, gutted it, and then had a rule that put it back together, and now won't appoint conferees to get it done. So there's people back in Iowa who are trying to figure out a pathway forward. We're right in the middle of harvest season. This is when people normally start planning for the future, and they have no way to plan.
Yeah, and no meeting scheduled or no conference committee appointed, right?
No, I saw Congressman Steve King from my home state in the House cloakroom on the Democratic side talking to Colin Peterson yesterday, trying to figure out how to get to conference and get this thing done.
There you go. Lynn, another one.
Well, it's another one. And it actually, this is one of the government programs that is time sensitive.
It is.
As opposed to some other things when you talk about funding.
So
what is there a stopgap measure for farmers to use?
No, the Farm Bill has expired, And even though some of the programming is going to continue, what really becomes critical is around the first of the year because of the timing of these programs. One of the things that will have profound impacts is we revert to the 1947 Farm Bill by default, which means that the Secretary of Agriculture, my former governor, Tom Vilsack, has the authority and the requirement to dramatically increase milk prices under the 1947 Farm Bills. That will have an enormous impact on consumers, and those are some of the consequences people aren't even aware of.
He's mandated to do that?
Yes, under the old Farm Bill that we are, because you have to go back to that time and think about the support system that was in place.
What doesn't connect for me is that the Republican Party always boasted, right? We're the party of the small farmer,
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, and here they are, and farmers are being hurt by this. President Obama mentioned in his news conference yesterday about farm supports also as one of the programs that's shut down because of the government shutdown that's not operating right now, too.
People who are signing up for loan programs, and there's nobody there to service those loans, take applications, all of those things are being impacted. And what's happening is people all around the country, Bill, are gradually encountering these obstacles because they are finally feeling the effect of the shutdown.
Do we just have about a couple of minutes left? One of the things that Lynn and I mentioned that's sort of gotten lost under the radar here is Obamacare and healthcare and the exchanges opening up, which is a big deal. What do you hear from your state? How's it going?
Well, it's amazing because it took a long time for our governor to embrace the expansion of Medicaid. And there's a waiver request pending before the secretary that's kind of a hybrid, but it was passed by the Iowa legislature, which includes the Democrats in charge of the Senate. Mm-hmm. And what happened is when the marketplace opened up, the pricing on these products is dramatically lower than pricing available to consumers before the Affordable Care Act went into place. This is what I've been reminding people. People forget we were experiencing double-digit premium increases in the private marketplace year after year after year. And now, for the first time since the 1960s, we've seen healthcare costs go up less than 4% in 2 consecutive years. So the reality is the effects that were supposed to happen are happening. Consumers are having a lot more options to choose from. And what's going to happen is as people go into those marketplaces and get coverage, I think it's going to push back against this narrative that Obamacare is going to be horrible for consumers.
What's interesting, quick, and I'll be quick, is I think how Republicans overplayed their hand on this in declaring the program, Obamacare, a disaster because the administration did mess up, and we have to admit that, in the launch. You know, they weren't ready with the online marketplaces. But just common sense tells you can't make that conclusion in a program that, you know, when they made it less than a week old. Yeah. So, you know, there is time. People should be on the backs of the administration to make it work.
6 months. Mm-hmm.
Well, and also to make it work.
That's right.
They've got to make it. They've got to get these things up and running.
They absolutely do have to make it work.
Yeah, you know it. And that's what Republicans are afraid of.
That's
so
right.
Many people are going to sign up. It's going to be so successful. I think it is here to stay. Hey, Congressman, we would just run out of time. Too bad. Great having you in the studio today.
Yeah, it's great
to
be
so
here.
Much. And I'll
see you both on Ragbri next year.
Yeah, all right. Absolutely. That's a great bike ride across Iowa. Now we're going to let you go back and settle this whole mess here. All right. Thanks, Congressman.
Thank you.
That's all for AmericasDemocrats.org. Thank you to all who made today's show possible. Sheryl Kaskowitz, James K. Galbraith, and the entire Bill Press team. And thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, please get involved in our efforts to keep this show going and to elect Democrats who are bringing the party back to its roots. Go to AmericasDemocrats.org and click on Donate at the top of the page. And be sure to find 21st Century Democrats on Facebook. For AmericasDemocrats.org, I'm your host, Jim Cuddy. We want you to sit back and listen, but we need you to stand up and fight. Join us, support the show, and help elect Democrats who will stand up for democratic principles with your contribution today. Go to